Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Rollercoaster Tycoon 1 and 2 introduced many cool different types of roller coasters, such as the wooden coaster, the inverted coaster and the giga coaster. However, Rollercoaster Tycoon 2 came out 22 years ago, and since then a number of new coaster types have been invented. But unfortunately they of course cannot be added to the game anymore. Or can they? The Open RCT2 project has improved the game in many different ways, and one of them is that 3 new coaster types were added: the hybrid coaster, the single rail coaster and the alpine coaster. In this video we will take a closer look at the first of these, the hybrid coaster, to see what it can do, what its stats are and how good this coaster type really is. The original rides were implemented by Chris Sawyer and Simon Foster, but these new rides were obviously not done by them. Now, for these we have to thank Extreme256, who has put many hours into implementing these rides into the game and creating the sprites. Without him we wouldn't have the hybrid coaster. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to separately download this coaster to have it, as it just comes with OpenRCT2 by default. The hybrid coaster in the game is based on the real-life hybrid coaster model by the Rocky Mountain Construction Company, or RMC, which built their first hybrid coaster, New Texas Giant, in 2011. These coasters could be seen as the next generation upgrade of the classic wooden coaster, as quite often new hybrid coasters are replacing an older wooden design. Their supports are still made out of wood, but the tracks are made from steel, making it a hybrid between the two materials, hence the name. These steel tracks allow for a smoother ride and a much bigger variety in track elements. While classic wooden coasters almost never have an inversion, the hybrid coaster can easily do pretty much any inversion you like. The in-game version doesn't have every inversion type you see in real life, but it does have some really cool unique track pieces that have never been seen before in Rollercoaster Tycoon 2. Before we discuss those pieces, I want to thank everyone who sent in a hybrid coaster to be featured in this video. I asked for submissions on my Discord server and we got a bunch of really good ones. Any park featured in this video that was submitted by someone will have credit to the creator in the bottom right of the screen. When climbing a hill, you can choose between using a traditional chain lift and a launched lift hill. Previously, the launched lift hill was only found on the Twister coaster, which actually makes for a good comparison. The hybrid coaster has a slightly weaker launched hill, but in return its support limit is a little bit higher at 63 meters. It can then go down with a vertical drop, after which you can choose to implement an inverted top hat, making use of the quarter loop element. So far we haven't seen any truly new track pieces, but that all changes when we look at the other inversions it has available. The barrel roll we do know, but what are these things called 0G rolls? Well, they are basically barrel rolls that include an airtime hill, and there are 2 types available. The small one you can build by going up with a gentle slope, and the big one requires a steep slope. If you take these at the correct speed, the guests will experience some weightlessness at the top, which is where the 0G part of the name 0G roll comes from. You don't need to learn anything new to use this effectively, as it's just a taller barrel roll, and for the stats all inversions count as the same in RCT2. It doesn't matter whether they're loops, corkscrews, twists or 0G rolls, all that matters is the number of inversions that is on the ride. What does matter are the other stats that the inversion generates, and the 0G rolls do generate lateral G-forces. Having your lateral G-forces above 2.8 is not good and will give you a lot of extra intensity and nausea, so it's a good idea to pay attention to that. To prevent extreme lateral Gs, the maximum speed you want to enter a full 0G roll at, which is the point here where the track changes color, is about 90 km per hour for the small 0G roll and 120 km per hour for the big one. With these speeds, the train will go about 85 and 95 km per hour respectively when the front car of the train, which is the only one that matters for lateral Gs, hits the top of the roll. Stay below these speeds and you will not get excessive lateral G forces. As a comparison, a banked small turn has a limit of 100 km per hour, a barrel roll has a limit of 120 km per hour and a banked medium turn has a limit of 160 km per hour. There There is another new track piece that the hybrid coaster has access to, and that is the large sloped turn. Lots of roller coaster types can do small and medium sloped turns, and a decent subset of those can also do banked small and medium sloped turns. However, not a single ride type in the game has access to large sloped turns, as they simply don't exist in Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2. But as with so many things, OpenRCT2 has made this better, and it has implemented both unbanked and banked large sloped turns for the new hybrid and single rail coaster types, and also for the Giga Coaster. They allow for a lot more flexibility when you want to put in a diagonal section of track, as now you can transition to that on hills as well as on level track. It also allows for very good looking sweeping upward or downward turns. It's an amazing track piece that I can recommend you all to try out. The one downside of using large sloped turns and zero G rolls is that you cannot save a ride design that uses them, as the saved track design format cannot handle it. The OpenRCT2 development team is working on a new track design format so that we can save these, but a lot of prior work still has to be done first, so that's a good while away. The last interesting track piece is the chain lift, which I dismissed at the start of this section in favor of the launched lift hill, but now it's back with a vengeance. Firstly, the hybrid coaster has access to steep chain lifts, which are quite rare and allow for more compact designs. What is even better is that the hybrid coaster and also the single rail coaster are the only coaster types with both a steep lift hill and a decently long train. This allows them to put steep turns in the middle of their chain lifts, or even go vertical for a bit, as the trains are long enough to bridge the gap. Secondly, these chain lifts are blazingly fast. The default and lowest chain lift speed on these is 8 km per hour, which is quite common. You can then increase this up to 12 km per hour on a lot of coaster types, and that is the fastest chain lift speed in the game. Except the hybrid coaster doesn't stop there and allows speeds all the way up to 17 km per hour. This can greatly reduce the time spent on the chain lift, shortening the ride time and increasing the throughput. Here we have three identical designs except for the chain lift speed. The red one goes 8 km per hour, the blue one 12 km per hour and the yellow one goes 17 km per hour. The number of guests per hour increases from 2050 to 2350 to 2600, which is a total increase of about 27%. The higher chain lift speed does have a downside though, and that is that it increases the chance of a breakdown happening. We can use the same three hybrid coasters with chain lift speeds of 8, 12 and 17 km per hour for this test as well. I let them run for 50 years and checked how many breakdowns they each got in that time frame. The 8 km per hour one got 178 breakdowns, the 12 km per hour one got 223 breakdowns, and the 17 km per hour one got a massive 283 breakdowns, which is nearly 60% more than the slowest chain lift speed of 8 km per hour. Is this worth it? Well, that depends. If you're charging for the ride, then the higher throughput will definitely offset the costs of the extra mechanic to make sure the ride gets fixed quickly. The one thing you cannot change is the increased crash chance from a breakdown, but that can be prevented by using block brakes. On the other hand, if you charge for the park entry, then throughput on rides isn't very important, and in this case I think a slower chain lift is the way to go. So, to summarize the special track pieces of the hybrid coaster, it has a launched lift hill, vertical slopes, quarter loops, barrel rolls, zero G rolls, large sloped turns and an unusually fast chain lift. The 8 different color schemes you see here are exactly all the default color schemes the hybrid coaster has, and 8 is quite a lot, so you get a decent amount of variety without even doing anything. It of course also has more basic things like helixes and S-bands, but those are available to so many coaster types that I don't really consider them special. Just like the other tracked ride types, the hybrid coaster has certain stat requirements that it needs to hit to prevent severe penalties to its excitement intensity and nausea ratings. It needs to have a drop of at least 10 meters, at least 2 drops, a top speed of at least 36 km an hour and at least 0.4 negative Gs. piece. If it fails to meet any of these requirements, its excitement, intensity and nausea ratings will be divided by 2 for every requirement it fails to meet. So if you fail all of them, it gets divided by 16. That shouldn't really ever happen though, as these requirements are low enough that you won't have to worry about them very often. But if your stats are suspiciously low, it's a good idea to check if your coaster meets all of them. Earlier, I compared the launched lift hill of the hybrid coaster to that of the twister coaster, and I think it's a good idea to compare these two coaster types some more. So I built two identical designs, one for the twister and one for the hybrid. First off, the hybrid coaster is a bit more expensive, with 14,245 euros compared to 12,587, which is a 13% increase. The track itself is about 8.5% more expensive, with 98 euros for a station piece compared to 90 for the twister coaster. This ratio is always the same for every track piece, so to compare the cost of two coaster types, you can simply compare the cost of two identical track pieces, and I always use the station piece for this. Because it's a wooden coaster, the supports are quite expensive, with 3.5 euros per unit per tile compared to the twister's 2.5, which is 40% more. The twister coaster's 90 euros on a station piece is already considered quite expensive, as for example the corkscrew coaster costs 79 euros for a station piece and the looping coaster only 68. This means that the hybrid's 98 euros is really quite expensive, but you do get your money's worth if you look at the stats. The twister coaster generally has pretty good stats already, and this design has 6.2 excitement, 5.9 intensity and 2.9 nausea. The hybrid coaster, on the other hand, has 7 excitement, 6.7 intensity and 3.0 nausea. Every single stat is higher on the hybrid coaster, meaning you can build a smaller ride to achieve the same stats, or get higher stats on the same design and charge more and get more park value from it. This excitement rating of 7 is actually incredibly high, and it's roughly the same as that of an equivalent Giga coaster, which has the highest excitement rating in the game. These great stats allow you to charge a lot of money for a ride ticket and also makes it give a lot of park value, as both are directly related to the ride stats. Here we have a twister coaster, a giga coaster and a hybrid coaster, all with the exact same design. The maximum ticket price for the twister and giga coaster is a little over 13 euros, while that of the hybrid is over 15 euros. Combined with a good maximum throughput that is higher than the giga coaster and just a little bit lower than the twister coaster, the hybrid coaster also has the highest profit per hour of these three rides. There is another reason that these three rides fit well together, and that is that they each attract 120 guests to the park, which is the highest in the game, and another reason that the hybrid coaster is really strong. We have now discussed all the important aspects of the hybrid coaster, so we can now use that knowledge to design some efficient designs. Of course, the hybrid coaster isn't available in any of the default scenarios, as it didn't exist yet when they were created, but you can use RCT2's object selection window to add it to any park you like. Recently made custom scenarios can also have it available, and I find that quite a few of them actually do. If you want to use any of the upcoming designs in your own parks, you can find a download for them in the description. As usual, we start with a couple of small designs. This first design is a very standard small design that is barely big enough to meet all the stat requirements. The train is just long enough and goes just fast enough to reach the chainlift track after the second turn, allowing it to be quite compact. Because of the launched lift hill, the ride time is incredibly short at only 14 seconds. Because of this, there is always a train ready to be loaded, giving it a great throughput of about 4,300 guests an hour. This, combined with a maximum ticket price of 12.8 euros, means it can reach a very good profit. Do be aware that this ticket price and the ones I show for all the other rides are only valid if the coaster is brand new and the only hybrid coaster in your park. If you have multiple of the same coaster type operating in your park, their value goes down by 25%. The age also influences the ride value separately from having multiple of them. Once a ride turns 5 months old, it loses 20% of its value, and it loses even more after the 13-month mark, after the 14-month mark and so on. The design you just saw me using in this demonstration is my old version of the classic small design. The problem is, while editing this part of the video, I found out that if you build it in a particular orientation, it cannot make it to the chain lift at the top of the hill, causing it to crash and be useless. This is a nice showcase of the physics of the game being ever so slightly different in different directions. The next design is even smaller than this, with a width of only 3 tiles, including the queue line. This one makes clever use of the steep chain lifts that the hybrid coaster has access to, and the fact that the trains are long enough to bridge the gap that the steep turns put in between the chain lift sections. This design was created by user Redwald on my Discord server, and the only thing I did was add a photo section and make the station 1 tile longer so that it could fit 2 trains instead of just 1. In almost all situations, there is no reason to use the previous design over this one. The costs are pretty much identical, but this tall design has a smaller footprint, a higher throughput and higher stats that result in a higher maximum ticket price. The third design also isn't mine. Instead, it was made by Jita92, who is active on Reddit and my Discord server. They make a lot of small compact designs for different coaster types, and as is usual for them, it includes a lot of path and scenery to get the excitement rating as high as possible. You may notice that the lateral G-forces are too high, giving it a penalty, and this is on purpose. The first penalty you get only gives a little over 2 extra intensity on the hybrid coaster, which only takes it to 7.4. This still isn't that high, but it does allow you to charge more money for a ticket, as all 3 stats contribute to that. The high excitement rating on this design is a little bit deceiving though, as when we remove all decorations except the queue and exit paths, it only has 6.2 instead of 7.2 excitement. But it does nicely show what you can do on the other currently naked designs if you wish to improve them. This design is absolutely perfect for if you want something that looks better than the 3 tile wide previous design without putting in any effort into decorating the ride yourself. The next design is the first one that I would call a proper roller coaster. It's fast, it's got 2 inversions and makes even more profit than the previous 3 designs. In all of my designs here, I've only included inversions that can actually be saved, which are barrel rolls and quarter loops. This ride, just like the previous one, runs the longest possible trains of 6 cars, and because of that the throughput is slightly higher than that of the first 2 small designs at nearly 5,000 guests per hour. Combined with the maximum ticket price of over 17 euros, this is the perfect coaster for making tons and tons of money without feeling the guilt of spamming microcoasters. But you know what can make even more money? A ride with more stations. This is a Mobius design that can reach a massive throughput of over 9,500 guests per hour. It has a bunch of block breaks which allow you to run 4 trains, making sure that there always is a train ready to let the guests board. Each side only has a single drop, which is not enough to satisfy the stat requirement of 2, but luckily the game adds up all sections to determine if the stat requirements are met, so this design works out fine. Before we get to the last design, I want to show off another compact, nicely decorated design that I didn't build. This one was created by Extreme256, the very creator of this ride type in Open RCT2. It is not the most optimized, but it is still really good and also a bit more realistic than my hyper-optimized designs. The 0G roll at the front cannot be saved, so if you download it and build it, it will have a hill there instead, which you can then replace with the 0G roll in the direction of your choosing. Lastly, there is my Powerhouse design. This hybrid coaster runs 3 trains, can process 5,000 guests per hour, has a maximum ticket price of 21 euros and is over 600 meters long. That last one is important for scenarios where the harder guest generation mode is enabled, as they're only rides that are at least 600 meters long and have at least 6 excitement attract guests after the first 1000. The ticket price is limited to 20 euros in this game, but in the future it might be increased in OpenRCT2, which would allow you to charge the full 21 euros and the guests would pay that. You can build even bigger designs than this one with even higher stats, but the Powerhouse design already has nearly 8 excitement and a ridiculous ticket price, so a bigger pre-built design isn't really necessary and mostly a waste of money from an efficiency standpoint. That doesn't mean that building a massive hybrid coaster is a bad thing, no, quite the opposite. What I mean with this is that those are best designed on the spot in the park that they are in, not beforehand as a compact design. And that is the hybrid coaster. It's a really strong coaster type that excels in fast layouts, high ticket prices and attracting a lot of guests to the park. It is also quite expensive to build, but that is the price you pay for pure quality and also its amazingly good looks. Nothing gets me more aroused than looking at a nice, smooth hybrid coaster. I want to thank everyone who submitted designs for this video, they were all really good. To learn all about the Wild Mouse coaster, click right here. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.